welcome to Best Laid Plans. This is your host, Sarah Hart-Unger, and this is a podcast where we talk all things planning and planning adjacent. Today, I have a Q&A episode for you for April. These are questions that were submitted over the past month, and I got some great ones, so excited to share them with you on this episode. I also have a couple of listener suggestions, and then a couple of notes that I'm going to start out with about Best Laid Plans Academy. But don't worry, we will get to the questions right up next. I just wanted to kick the show off to let people know, if you are interested in signing up for Best Laid Plans Academy 2.0 version, that it is almost full. It may be full by the time this airs. I have to record a few days in advance, so it's always hard to know. But as of the recording right now, there are a few slots remaining, but this probably will be the last mention before it is full. And this is a summer program, essentially a planning boot camp, where I take you through interactive lessons on planning at every level, from inbox management to task management and calendars, to then planning at the yearly, seasonal, monthly, weekly, and daily level. And the goal of this program is to make sure that your system is as functional as it can be, whether you're tweaking one that already exists and just has some issues, or building one from the ground up. This is similar in content to Best Laid Plans Academy 1.0, but it's revamped with all new materials, workbook, etc. So it's basically a refreshed version of the prior course. And I have taught this course 5 times in the past, beginning with 2022. So I feel like I learned so much from doing it, and I had wanted to create an even better version. So that's what this one is. I got a couple questions as to how does it differ from things like planning by season and the yearly planning courses. Those yearly planning courses and planning by season are guided planning experiences, meaning you want someone to take you through your seasonal planning every season for the duration of the year. Planning by season is a year-long course, and it's in 10 sessions. There's basically one core session for each season, plus one in between each. And I only open up that course towards the end of each year. So it's not registering right now, but of course I will be opening it for 2027 later in the fall. But they are 2 different things. Again, planning by season is like having someone plan along with you throughout the year because you want to do it in a guided fashion. Whereas Best Laid Plans Academy is more of a, again, boot camp to teach you to DIY. Now, there are some people who want to DIY and also participate in season because maybe at the seasonal level, you like to have that companionship and guide, but they are definitely 2 different programs. So if you have any further questions, let me know. You can reach me via email. It's my name, Sarah with an H, .hart, Hart.unger @gmail.com. And I think this probably will be the last mention of BLPA 2.0. So don't worry if you're tired of hearing it because you weren't going to participate. That'll probably be it for a while. All right, so we are going to get into our Q&A. And the first thing I will mention is that I got an email from a listener named Maureen saying she missed my planner reviews and why have I not been doing them for a while? And the reason, there's no specific reason. I love doing planner reviews. I just honestly, what tends to cause me to deeply dive into a planner is my own planner wanderlust. And I've been so happy with my current system that I just haven't been in that universe as much. However, I am absolutely still up for doing reviews, especially of new brands or new layouts that are exciting. So if you have a brand that you feel like really deserves a review, something different out there in the planner world, or a redesign of something that is really adding new functionality, please let me know because I always will take suggestions. And I will say that the 2 things that I've noticed in the analog planner world lately are the Simplified launch. So Simplified is the label that Emily Lay runs, and they make very premium, aesthetically pleasing, feminine looking planners in a few main layouts, daily, weekly, and then these new weekly spiral bounds. And her new covers and layouts for 2026, 2027 just came out. She's one of the few creators, I feel like, that does a kind of spring launch where she then sells planners that start in August. So these just came out and they are quite beautiful. I will say in the past couple of years, she's introduced these new spiral bound, slightly cheaper option planners that have the week horizontally on one side and a blank page on the other. And I do feel like this is a layout people ask for a lot. And yet I don't always think of Simplified off the bat because they were a little bit newer to this layout. But if you're looking for a book that would just be fantastic for task management alone, like you don't need it for calendaring, but you struggle with keeping a weekly task list or figuring out what to pin tasks to a specific day, this might be a great option for you. So I'll link that in the show notes. No affiliation, and I haven't ordered anything specifically for review, but this is what's catching my eye lately. And then, of course, there are the Hobonichi Spring Start Planners. Now, this episode is airing in mid-April, and the Hobonichi Spring Start Planners start April 1st. But if you are somebody who maybe ordered a planner for January and it just didn't work out, or you had a major life event and everything in your planner had to change, that kind of happened to me last year, a spring start can be a wonderful way to do a do-over. And then you can always use that planner until the end of the calendar year and then potentially start fresh with something else in January. And even though it seems like it might be a waste to have a few extra months worth of pages in there, sometimes it can really help with the kind of planning ahead aspect of things, or you can use those pages for notes. So don't overlook the April Start Hobonichi options. They're available everywhere. There's not as much of the kind of frenzied hysteria, at least in the US, over ordering them. So I feel like there's not this like scarcity mindset. You can find them at your local planner shops that carry Hobonichi. You can find them via JetPens, and even Amazon sells them, although limited cover options. But you may already have a cover and just need a new book if you need a fresh start. So that's another thing that is catching my eye in the analog planner land recently. But I would love suggestions for things that I should cover, look at, and review in future episodes. I do not want to leave my reviews behind, and I think we are definitely overdue to have some on the show. All right, so the first question comes in from Renee, and I had to include this because I happen to have a built-in answer from another listener that sent it to me just a few days prior. So Renee writes, "Hi, I'm wondering if you have suggestions for digital shared task management. My husband is maybe a little ADHD, and I also have a teen daughter, and I'd like to be able to outsource reminders of tasks to reduce my nagging. For example, my husband works near our preferred chocolate shop, and I emailed him multiple times in the days coming up to Easter to please pick up Easter treats for the kids. After 4 such reminders, he did go. The procrastination, however, stressed me out, so it is harder for me to outsource to him. I'd love it if I could send him recurring reminders so his phone nags him instead of me repeatedly mentioning it. Similarly, my teen has to remember, for example, to see a certain teacher at home room time on Wednesday to sign up for a certain honor society. I told her to set her own reminder, but I don't know if she did. Now I will ask her about it repeatedly until Wednesday. Is there a digital way to send repeated reminders to a loved one's phone? I want to outsource my outsourcing." I love this question. I love the colorful details that she included. I feel like it's very fitting to include this tip as one potential answer that comes from listener Olivia. And Olivia writes, "I thought I would share that when people, my kids or husband, ask me to remind them to do something, I type them a text then and use send later to schedule it to send whenever the reminder is needed. The examples she gives are that, she says, my college-age son asked to be reminded to pay his bills later in the day. I scheduled a text that said to be sent at 6:30 p.m. My youngest asked to be reminded to work on a school assignment the following morning, so I scheduled a text for the time she asked to be reminded. Finally, I read the school newsletter and saw that it's pajama day at school on Friday, so I scheduled a text for Thursday night to the kids that reminds them of that fact." So I love this tip, and I think that goes so well with Renee's question. And I guess I would say to Renee, maybe some of this repeated reminding is in a way you're reminding too early. Like if you really only need the Easter basket by Sunday, maybe don't start on Monday. I don't know. Potentially, you have to think strategically, like when would it make sense to send these reminders? And maybe you would send, I don't know, one on Tuesday and then an extra one on Thursday that's like, last chance, if you didn't get the Easter stuff, please get it now. P.S. I love you. Ignore this text if you already got it. So if you wrote both of those and you knew both of them were going to their phone in the right kind of time frame, then that might solve your issue. Now, of course, another thought would be whether the person might be agreeable to use a shared task management system. But from what you've described, I don't know if that would be feasible. But if they were on board and wanted to do something like use the skylight system, which allows people to check off their own chores so you can like see what they're doing, or if you were both using Todoists where you could share lists with each other and you'd be able to see what's still on the list because they weren't checking it off, that might be really, really helpful. And honestly, your partner might be interested in some of these things because they might not enjoy the repeated nagging. So they might be looking for some way that they could be pinged about stuff on a daily basis, but also be able to check them off so that you'd know things were complete. And if that's the case, one of these kind of shared task management universes might be helpful. But if not, and you're looking for just something simple to send a repeated reminder, then I think that a delayed text would be a very simple and elegant solution. I also will say for the teen scenario you mentioned, I do think bringing up with the teen specifically, like, hey, you have to do this. How are you going to remember? And like having them think through how they would like to be reminded. They might say, oh, you know what? I'll set a phone alarm right now. Or, oh, I'll delay a text to myself. Or, oh, I'll put it on my Structure app because I've been using that lately and I look at it every day. Like, I do think this is a wonderful time in their lives for them to be figuring out what does work for these kind of remember to do it later kind of scenarios. That is a skill that is only going to serve them incredibly well for the rest of their lives. So to the extent that you can use these examples, especially if things are a little bit lower stakes, to help them build their own toolbox of things that they want to use, the better. So I hope that helps, Renee. Thank you so much for the specific and kind of colorful question. And thank you, Olivia, for such a great initial answer for Renee. We're going to take a quick break and I'm going to answer a couple more questions from listeners. Today's episode is brought to you in part by Mint Mobile. I don't know about you, but I like keeping my money where I can see it. Unfortunately, traditional big wireless carriers also seem to like keeping lots of money too. One of my close family members recently told me about how much she started saving once she switched to Mint Mobile. The price difference is huge, and the difference in service for her has been undetectable. You too can stop overpaying just because that's what you're used to and get the financial benefit of switching today. At Mint Mobile, plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. You can bring your own phone and number and start saving immediately. If you like your money, Mint Mobile is for you. Shop plans at mintmobile.com/BLP. That's mintmobile.com/BLP. Upfront payment of $45 for a 3-month, 5GB plan required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customer offer for first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details. Today's episode is brought to you with support from IXL. It's that time of year again, the last push towards the end of the school year. I know my kids are super busy with so many spring activities, and there's the end of year standardized testing to look forward to as well. Whether you're a homeschooling parent or you want to provide some extra learning support for your child, IXL is a great tool, and this time of year is a wonderful time to try it out. My kids are using IXL and have been for years to learn and reinforce concepts, and I know it's made a positive impact on their learning. IXL can be used as enrichment, review, or part of a homeschool curriculum. Everything is organized by grade and subject, and you can quickly find what each child needs without juggling multiple resources. The interactive practice and clear explanations and feedback make it easy to reinforce learning as you prepare for end-of-year assessments or milestones. Make an impact on your child's learning, get IXL now. And Best Laid Plans listeners can get an exclusive 20% off IXL membership when they sign up today at IXL.com/plans. Visit IXL.com/plans to get the most effective learning program out there at the best price. Today's episode is brought to you with support from Green Chef. I think we've all seen those big promises from big diet trends. The idea that there's one quick fix that's going to change everything overnight. And while some approaches can work for a while, they are generally not so sustainable long term. That's why I really appreciate what Green Chef does. Where fad diets fail, Green Chef delivers real food and recipes that actually make healthy eating easier and help the habit last. Each week, you get access to over 40 recipes made with organic produce, responsibly sourced proteins, and ingredients you can actually recognize. You can pick what works for you, Mediterranean, high protein, or their new longevity line focused on brain and gut health. One of my favorite things is just how excited everyone gets for dinner when it's a Green Chef week. It feels like we're eating something a little more special without a ton of extra effort. Plus, they now even offer free one-on-one nutrition coaching, which is such a nice bonus if you're looking for extra support to stay on track. I definitely recommend giving it a try, especially if you're in your spring busy season. Head to greenchef.com/50bestlaid and use code 50bestlaid to get 50% off your first month, then 20% off for 2 months. That's code 50bestlaid at greenchef.com/50bestlaid. All right, I'm back and I have a couple of questions from newer listeners who came to me after I was on Cal Newport's podcast a little bit ago. It's always really fun to kind of get a new population exposed to some of my methods and techniques. And so it's been exciting and fun to hear from some of these people. The first one is kind of a lighter question that comes from listener Lindsay. And she writes, I just started working through my first annual planning and the ideas of planning seasonally, and I think it'll help me solve some of the blocks with how to plan with variation in the year. Very excited to get started. So thank you, Lindsay. Then she writes, you mentioned evaluating your reading lists in your seasonal planning. What are some ways that you or others keep track of books? Not necessarily books you've read, but books you might want to read. I'm a literature teacher and avid reader, but I also get so many book recommendations from people. Dumping them all in a single place hasn't worked well, and I don't have a good review method. Any ideas for keeping the reading list usable? So my answer might be different from yours because it sounds like you're a professional reader in some ways. You're a literature teacher. So it might be a little bit more high stakes for you in terms of like really keeping recommendations at the ready. But honestly, reading is one of the areas of my life where I tend to just accept the fact that life is very finite. There are millions and millions of books, and there's going to have to be some serendipity around what I read. Yet I still enjoy having a finite selection of titles to choose from that have been recommended. So I start fresh every season. I will look at the prior season's list and be like, are any of these books still sounding like, oh my gosh, I keep hearing about that. Like my rule is if I hear it from 3 separate sources, I really want to make sure I read it. Although I will say, if a book is really meant to be, it'll probably come back around to you again, even if you move on. So I'll look at that prior season's list and then say, okay, maybe 1 or 2 are moving on, but otherwise I'm starting fresh. And a lot of times I'll have like a little Apple Notes brain dump that I will clear out and put into my new seasonal list, or I will just think of things off the top of my head, or I'll notice that some of my favorite bloggers or reading podcasts are doing kind of like monthly recaps. I also tend to do something where if I hear about a book that just really resonates with me, I put it on my library holds list right away. That way it can physically come to me and then I can decide whether to read it or not. So yeah, I guess I'm just not super structured about it. However, I do really enjoy having a seasonal to be read list to pull from. I also have a couple of tried and true sources that I use very regularly. One of them is Modern Mrs. Darcy's lists. So she has a podcast called What Should I Read Next? And she also does formalized kind of recommendation lists for various seasons like summer. And so when I read her guides, I will often pick some of the titles for a given season and just have fun with that. I don't always kind of put myself in a situation where I like really want to get through a certain number in a given season. I find that too stressful, but every once in a while, I do find that to be a fun challenge. So I guess what I'm saying, because I feel like I'm contradicting myself a lot, is that I'm pretty flexible and lax and kind of living in the moment when it comes to my book list. I like to have some kind of list to work from, but in no way do I feel like it's a complete or perfect list. And again, since you're a literature teacher, this might not be the right recommendation for you. You might want something more systematic. I could imagine doing something like a Google Sheet where you have either things are like sorted by mood so that you can pick books based on like the mood or the season, or you have a rating system for how excited you are to read a given book. And then you could just sort by that. Like, if it's a 9.9, you're going to be like, oh, this will bubble up first. And if it's a 6, it might never bubble up, but that's okay because there's books that you're more excited about. And if you hear about a book again, you can move it up on the list. There are so many ways that you could do this and no right way at all, but you did ask how I did it. So I guess I'll say I'm very loosey-goosey about it. And I like to start fresh every season. It does mean I'm leaving tons of amazing titles behind, but that's the sad part about our finite lives and books. I've heard the stat before, and I shared this on the podcast, that like, if you have 40 more years to live and you're going to read 50 books a year, that's 2,000 books. That's it. That's the end. And I mean, I probably hear about 2,000 books a year. So most of them are not going to be read. And that's okay. That's life. All right. Our final question comes from Brian. And I definitely wanted to answer this because I know this is such a common struggle. And Brian wrote, I've spent years refining my planning systems, from getting things done to more structured weekly and daily planning approaches. At this point, I feel like I can map out my time well. I know what I need to do and when, but the problem is execution. Even with a solid plan, things consistently fall apart. Sometimes it's external, urgent issues that disrupt the day, but more often it's internal. Tasks take longer than expected, or if I hit a moment where I simply don't have the motivation or cognitive energy to start. I just don't. I can see the work clearly, but I don't initiate it. This creates a frustrating cycle. I build a thoughtful plan, don't follow through, revert to reactive work, feel the stress of that, and then try to fix it by improving my system only to repeat the same pattern. In my role, I'm managing people and operating in a leadership capacity, so my time is fragmented and full of competing demands. I keep thinking that if I could just execute more consistently, everything would feel more manageable. I'm curious how you think about the gap between planning and doing. Specifically, how do you approach task initiation, procrastination, and actually following through on a well-designed plan? Thank you for all the work you put into this space. I'm inspired again to plan more effectively, and I'm experimenting with some analog components too. And Brian also found me through Cal Newport's awesome podcast. I can link to that episode once more in the show notes. So I actually had a full episode that I entitled The Gap Between Planning and Doing. And it's a little bit more focused on why people procrastinate with larger projects that they think they want to do. And I have a number of questions you can ask yourself about some of these projects that can help make them, get you out of that loop where they seem too big or too boring or too unpleasant. A lot of times it's because tasks are not well defined enough, like they're much too big. You've put into your calendar that I need to, write draft of book proposal or something like that. And it's too large of a project. And when you try to bite off more that you can chew, your brain realizes that this is not realistic and it's going to be desperate to find something entirely else. When the task is small enough and specific enough, that is less likely to happen. In addition, many of us need to have ourselves convinced of the time sensitivity of what we're doing in order to feel motivation to get it done. That's particularly true when something is very boring. So planning your tasks so that you don't have almost too much time buffer can actually be a strategic thing to do. I often record my podcast basically a week before they're due. That is because podcasting is not something that anyone would perish if it didn't happen on time. And yet I find if I have too much lead time, I just find it more difficult to get into the groove. So being really strategic about when you're planning to not leave too much buffer can actually be something that helps you to move forward. Making sure there are things that you actually want to be doing. Now, of course, we all have things in our lives that we really kind of need to do and aren't excited about, and that's a little bit different. But sometimes goals are in a way optional, and we want to make sure that we actually have the right goal on our place. And then finally, I think that breaking up really boring and unpleasant tasks with more positive ones can be helpful, because if you assign yourself 6 hours straight of very boring and tedious work, you're probably going to interrupt yourself very, very frequently. Your brain is going to have trouble putting your head down for that length of time. I know my husband, I'll use him as an example. He definitely struggles with sitting down and doing things that are very admin or very tedious. And he is much better off doing one little piece of that work at a time, or else he will just procrastinate the whole thing endlessly. And for him, deadlines that have a true reason behind them, like, okay, this is actually the last time you can submit this or you will not get your reimbursement, that definitely helps as well. So ill-defined end dates or accountability can be very problematic in these situations. And then finally, since you came from the Cal Newport universe, I will mention that it sounds like some of the things you're trying to do might be described as deep work. And so if there is a way that you can very clearly delineate on your calendar what the best time is for you in terms of your natural rhythms to really try to protect your time from either interrupting yourself. So maybe you're setting a very clear tech boundary here, like if you use Opal or another screen time type protector, you have it so that you can only get into the apps you need to do your work. And you really try to keep the outside forces at a minimum during that window as well. So let's say from 8:30 to 10, you are going to do this, whatever this deep work, most important task is for the day. You know that you really want to have it done by 10. You make it as specific as possible. You get in as much accountability as possible. You make sure that you're not assigning yourself something impossible within that time window. Like sometimes you need more support or more information or more help. So figuring out what the missing pieces are can help as well. And then I'd say, assess how you did with the execution each time so you can figure out which ingredients are the most helpful to get you to move things forward. So I hope this helps. I definitely feel like this is a common problem. I will link to the episode that I did previously called The Gap Between Planning and Doing, since that's exactly how you framed your question. So there might be more information and help for you there as well. Well, this has been a really fun episode. Thanks to the questions that you all have submitted. I love that. Please keep them coming. We have a fun and potentially slightly controversial topic next week. I can imagine some of you might be able to guess what that is, but I'll leave it a mystery for now. And I have a great expert guest, so I'm super excited for that. I will be back with more planning fun in the meantime. Let me know what you'd like to hear more of on the podcast, including planner review recommendations. And as I said, please keep the questions coming. Have a wonderful week. I'll be back in your feed next Monday. Thank you so much for listening. As always, the show notes and also the information on Best Laid Plans Academy 2.0 can be found on my website, theshoebox.com, with the course info at theshoebox.com/courses.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM, women's voices amplified.